So I understand there's two, I guess, long existing Bhakti Vriksha groups. One studying Nectar Devotion, chapter 14. Another studying Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 3. And then another group that's come, that's kind of a newer, more newly formed group. And then a sprinkling of other people from other places. So I was challenged a little bit how to connect all those different pieces together. So I decided we'd just read from Bhagavad-Gita. And what I understood, the last verse that you discussed was chapter 3, text number 10? Text number 9. Okay. So I'll discuss text number 10 from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3. What's the... getting everyone focused with some quiz questions. What's the title of chapter 3? What's the title of chapter 3, Bhagavad Gita? Okay. Karma Yoga. What's the meaning? Karma Yoga. What's the meaning of Karma Yoga? What is the meaning? Karma Yoga means?
Doing like fruitive activities and giving results to Krishna.
Okay. Here's a more difficult one. What's the difference between... What's the similarity and the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga? Anyone like to volunteer the answer to that question? The similarity and the difference between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Anyone want to volunteer the answer to that question? It's not like rocket science here. It's Bhagavad Gita. Similarity and difference. Yes.
In Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, we do activities, but in Bhakti Yoga, we do it for the pleasure of Krishna.
Okay. Could you just explain the first part a little bit more? What's the difference if you're offering the fruits to Krishna and working for Krishna? What's the difference? You have it right. Just expand it. Don't get intimidated by the question. Keep going.
The difference between...
When someone is offering the fruits, they have prescribed duties, and they offer the results, or at least some of the results of their prescribed duties, unto Vishnu or Krishna. How is that different than working for Krishna?
The motivation is only to please Krishna.
So, in which case? In both of them? Or, and then if that's a contrast, what's the consciousness in Karma Yoga?
Karma Yoga, he's just doing what, according to his psychophysical, he's just doing whatever he got the job or
Okay.
but not for the motivation of pleasing Krishna.
Okay. So the motivation, instead of for pleasing Krishna, what's his motivation? Just doing what he's supposed to do. Is there something? Some motivation? For a person who's doing Karma Yoga, what's the motivation?
For his own pleasure.
Okay. In what way is it his own pleasure? I'm sorry, I'm picking on you here. In what way is it his own pleasure?
He has to maintain his family.
Okay. Yes.
Whereas karma yoga can be performed by anyone, and then the result of that can be offered to Krishna. But for the
What's that qualifier? What's that qualifier platform?
Qualifier platform is the process of bhakti. There has to be like one has to fall into the disciplic succession and various other parameters. Right? So bhakti, like what I understand, the pure devotional service, one cannot just perform. It has to be. It is a systematic process. It has to be with the mercy of Guru and Maharaj. One can perform. But Karma
Okay,
Yoga,
okay, okay. Um, we're getting into an area that I think I need to start editing. uh, supposing you're lost and you're trying to get from point A to point B and you're lost somewhere between A and B. So you pull into a gas station and you ask the gas station attendant, which way to get to point B? And he says, oh, this is how to get to point B. And exactly get you to point B. Now, has that person just engaged in devotional service or not? He didn't, what platform is he on? He doesn't know anything about anything. He's just, you're a guy that came up and asked how to get to point B. How does that make it, is that devotional service or not?
it's not.
What is it? And why is it not devotional service? You're not sure. I shouldn't ask you such a hard question. It's devotional service. Supposing, you're with an enthusiastic group that go out on the monthly Sankirtan festival and you knock on the door and somebody says, I never heard of this book before, but you're so convinced, let me take a copy. How much? And they take a copy. They give you something. Is that devotional service? Why is that devotional service and the gas station attendant isn't devotional service? They're both devotional service. Why? They're not, going back to your definition, they're not doing it with the motivation of love for Krishna. They're not doing it with the motivation of love for Krishna. But devotional service has begun. You know that example, the classic example from 26 Second Avenue? Right in the middle of class. Imagine if right in the middle of class the door opens and a drunkard comes in and he comes and places some toilet paper in the bathroom and stumbles back out again. We would think that that person just disrupted the class like anything. That happened at 26 Second Avenue. And the devotees were really disturbed, and Prabhupada said, no, this is very nice. His devotional service has begun. Now that was knowing. He went out and got some toilet paper and brought it to the center. In these other cases, they didn't knowingly doing anything. So, but it's devotional service because part of what you said is correct. You, that was lost getting from point A to point B, were looking for direction to get to point B in Krishna's service. Because you wouldn't go out to go to point B unless it's for Krishna's service, would you? You're a devotee, so you go to point B for a devotional service. And someone assists that, and that's devotional service. Because you're the carrier of bhakti, they get the opportunity to engage in bhakti. Go ahead. We're not speaking, I didn't say, you put that nice adjective. I'm speaking just, the distinction between karma yoga and bhakti yoga. Let's just keep it simple. Let's keep it simple. We're looking at principles here.
So having any material desire, let's say if I perform a service, but I have a material desire for the service, so is that...
Yes, that's devotional service. Who can raise their hand and say, I have no material desire? I don't see any hands. Are we engaged in devotional service? Yes. As followers of Rupa Goswami, particularly, at least trying to be followers of Rupa Goswami, we know those desires are there. We know the means to uproot those desires. It's devotional service. In the practicing stage. How many hours of practice did it take to get to be able to sing like this? Lots of hours of practice. It probably didn't sound like this. Et cetera, et cetera. Driving a car. When someone's going to learn to drive a car, there's driving a car and there's what people that do when they really don't know how to drive a car and they're learning to drive a car, but the car's moving. Devotional service in practice is devotional service. Even unknowingly engaging in devotional service is devotional service. What makes it devotional service? So, but back to your definition, the purpose of devotional service as Krishna is to be pleased. So if motivation for devotional service, even I may not know that, if you, the carrier of bhakti, have that intention, then that other person benefits. Here's another statement that Prabhupada gave. Really nice. If someone gives a donation on Sankirtan, this is now addressing his devotee audience of the time, many, many devotees going forth into the public, distributing books. If someone gives a donation for the temple, and the person receiving that donation doesn't find some other destination for that donation, but it actually goes to the treasury, and the treasury uses that donation in the service of the deity, the person that gave the donation and the pujari that's performing the worship on the altar, the spiritual benefit they get is the same. Now the consciousness of the person that's the pujari, presumably and hopefully and most likely, is better than the person that gave the donation. Let's just say in terms of material desires other than Krishna. But the spiritual benefit they gain is the same. They're just at a different stage of the trajectory of bhakti. And now let's go back to the Karma Yoga, because that's chapter 3. Karma Yoga is offering the fruits of one's work unto Vishnu. So those of you that who are in the Bhakti Viksha group that is studying Bhagavad-Gita chapter 3? Okay. So for those of you that just are raising your hands, what is the impetus in those first 9 verses? In general, what's the impetus for someone to engage in Karma Yoga? Why not just engage in karma? Uh-oh. With karma, there's bondage. And with karma yoga, you're free from bondage. So the motivation is to become free from bondage. So I take the fruits of my work and offer it to Vishnu and wash my hands. I want release from bondage of my work. But I have to work, because that's discussed in those earlier verses. You can't not work, because the soul is within the body, and the soul is active, and the soul is going to impel the body to work. You have to work. You can't exist. You can't maintain your body, like, maintain your family. You can't maintain your body without some work. I don't recommend that you try it. Just do nothing. Just sit there and do nothing. Your body will deteriorate. So you have to do something. You do something and there's bondage. So, like the not so nice saying, damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you do something, there's bondage, and you can't do nothing. So you do karma yoga. Wishing freedom from the bondage of work. And the verses coming up that start with 11 and so forth, with that sacrifice to Vishnu, there's also the devas that are recipients of that, karma kanda ritual, the sacrifice where the devas receive and the devas give. So a system where they're nourished and the living entity engaged in the sacrifice, they're nourished, their needs are met. Dharma, artha, kama. And there is a sense gratificatory spirit. Vishnu's there, and I'm there. My needs are met. I want bondage. I want freedom from bondage, and I want my necessities met. So here's the system. It's provided. Now there's levels. Sakam karma yoga, nishkam karma yoga. There's levels of karma yoga. And that depends upon one's association. The whole life depends upon association. With whom do you associate? And you share the consequence of those with whom you associate. So bhakti has the element of coming in contact with a bhakta who's carrying bhakti. And then one can be connected to bhakti, even at the most elementary stages and progressively further and further. Pure bhakti is a cultivation of no attachments to material desire, no attachments to mental speculation. And that's pretty rare because material life is made up of those two things. So it's no more material life. But still living in the world where one engages in all varieties of duties or activity. But that the consciousness changes. That just one thing. For Krishna. Just one thing. All varieties, just one thing. All varieties, just one thing. For Krishna. That's pure bhakti. And now, there's a similarity? Because that was the question. The similarity is, in bhakti, well, the fruits naturally go to Krishna because the activity is for Krishna, so the fruits it's already there. It's a subset of bhakti. So sometimes, you read very carefully, Prabhupada will use these terms interchangeably. Sometimes he'll use them contrastingly. Karma yoga or bhakti yoga. In one sense, bhakti yoga is the mature stage of karma yoga, or when one does everything just for Krishna. You want to do that? You can go back there. Distracting. So, karma yoga. So that verse 10, which is so all of that is just to get us focused on what verse 10 says. Verse 10 of Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 3, speaks about sacrifice for Vishnu, Yagyavai Vishnu. Yagya means Vishnu. The purpose of living according to Vedic life is to make sacrifice to Vishnu. So let's read the verse. Saha yagya praja srishtva Puruvacha prajapati Anena prasavishyadhyavam Esho vas vishtad kamadhuk. Translation: In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them, saying, Be thou happy by this yajna or sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Purport. The material creation by the Lord of creatures, Vishnu, is a chance offered to the conditioned souls to come back home, back to Godhead. So here's the overlap part. Prabhupada is reaching way down into the Karma Yoga realm and saying, voila, this is Krishna's arrangement to help all living entities that want and this and that and the other thing to come to Krishna. It's like, the mature purpose, a mature stage. All living entities within the material creation are conditioned by material nature because of their forgetfulness of their relationship with Vishnu or Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic principles are to help us understand this eternal relation, as it is stated in the Bhagavad-Gita. Vedaishcha sayarvair aham eva vedyaha. The Lord says that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Him. In the Vedic hymns it is said, Patim Vishvasya Meshvaram, Vishvasya Meshvaram, Vishvasyat Meshvaram. Therefore, the Lord of all of the living entities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also, 2:420, Srila Shukadeva Goswami describes the Lord as Pati in so many ways. And you hear Pati mentioned. Shriya Patir, Yagya Patir, Praja Patir, Dhyam Patir, Loka Patir, Dhara Pati. Patir Gatis Cha Daka Vishnu Sattvatam. Prasidatam me Bhagavan Satam Patihi. The word Prajapati is Lord Vishnu, and He is the Lord of all living creatures, all worlds, all beauties, and the protector of everyone. The Lord created this material world to enable the conditioned souls to learn how to perform yajnas, or sacrifices for the satisfaction of Vishnu, so that while in this material world they can live very comfortably, without anxiety, and after finishing the present material body, they can enter into the kingdom of God. That is the whole program for the conditioned soul. By performance of yajna, the conditioned souls gradually become Krishna conscious and become godly in all respects. In the age of Kali, the Sankirtan yajna, the chanting of the names of God, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this transcendental system was introduced by Lord Chaitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtan yajna and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna, in his devotional form as Lord Chaitanya, is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.32 as follows, with special reference to the Sankirtan Yajna. Very famous verse. Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam Sangopangastra Parshadam Yagyai Sankirtana Prayayar Yajantihi Sumedasaha. Translation. In this age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates, by performance of Sankirtan Yagya. Last sentence. Other yagyas prescribed in the Vedic literatures are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but the Sankirtan Yagya is easy and sublime for all purposes, as recommended also in Bhagavad-Gita 9:14. One of the many glories of Srila Prabhupada's purports is, from the very outset, practically every verse, whatever is being spoken of, is bhakti, pure devotional service. Although there's so many other subject matters, including this one, particularly, as I mentioned, the next verses are describing how the demigods are pleased, and when the demigods are pleased, they bestow upon living entities, and living entities receive their necessities, and it's like harmony within material creation by the principle of sacrifice. And by observing the principle of sacrifice, that harmony is very naturally invoked. And the converse, without sacrifice for Vishnu, then disharmony prevails amongst men and within the cosmic manifestation in general. Individual interest supersedes the interest of the Supreme. And when we place the interest of the Supreme, then there can be harmony, even though there are so many different interests from individuals or groups of individuals, because Vishnu is to be pleased. God consciousness creates that harmony. So even this principle of sacrifice, even taking it at a, depending upon where one is in the trajectory of consciousness, could just be, I'm a worldly person, I've learned something about karma, I don't want to become implicated in karma, but I do have my wants, I want my wants to be fulfilled, so this is a good program, I'll sign up. I'll find someone that knows how to do various yagyas, and I'll do yagyas, and I'll participate, and then I'll be in the harmony program, and still have my necessities program, and I'll be freed from the bondage of my work. I'll sign up. How do I become a member? So even if one is at that stage, depending upon the consciousness of the person who is engaging them, it may elevate them to the position of going back to Godhead at the end of this life, depending upon how they move, how their consciousness becomes elevated and cleansed. Conversely, it depends on how much attached one is to being an independent enjoyer, a license for independent enjoyment, depending upon one's attachment to the temporary versus one's attachment to the Supreme. The bhakti directly brings one to the position of attachment to the Supreme. It brings one to that position. By design, it's built like that. The other is built to relieve one of the motivation part, relieve one from the bondage of work, while I still have this propensity to work. So I'll work religiously and offer the fruits to Vishnu, or at least some of the fruits to Vishnu. At least a sliver to Vishnu. And so, depending upon the variable is consciousness, and a big part of that is the association that one has, and the standards of the teaching. What's the purpose of this karma yoga, or what's the purpose of Bhagavad-Gita, or what's the purpose of creation? What's the purpose of life? Depends on the association that you have. So in the family setting, it's the responsibility of mothers and fathers to know what the purpose of life is, and then, as best as they can, convey the purpose of life to the members of the family, and conduct the affairs within the family accordingly. Not just externally we say something and internally we're something else. But the unit is the family, and then families come together to help similarly cultivate and propagate that consciousness, Krishna consciousness. And as Prabhupada concludes the purport, other forms of yajna in this age are not easy. He doesn't elaborate, but they're not easy to perform. The Sankirtan yajna is very easy to perform. And in fact, it's the mature fruit of all the other forms of sacrifice. Something anecdotal, I'll just share this and see if there's any discussion. Some years ago, one of the places I was requested to visit, I won't even name the city because it might be embarrassing to the people from that city. Some faraway city. The devotees had this idea that they wanted to make some connection with the nearby Hindu temple. So they had made an arrangement, without asking me, that I would be a speaker at a Hindu temple function. And then they made the arrangement, then they asked me would I like to go. I didn't want to go, but they had already made the arrangement, so I went. So we attended the function, and I was very surprised that the priest was wearing Vaishnav tilak, and I was introduced to him that he was trained in Udupi, a Madhvacharya, Madhvacharya Vaishnav, that was trained in Udupi, and he was doing a Karmakanda Yajna in the Hindu temple. And I'd never attended one of those before, but the first mantra that he chanted was one that we all know, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And a little light went on that said, oh, that's the bhokta of the yajna. Bhoktaram yagatapasam. So, invoking Vishnu, or in this case, Vasudeva Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And then, I heard a bunch of other names. I heard Ganesh's name, and I heard, this Deva and that Deva's name, and I got restless and got up and walked out. And then I went and asked later, so then I was supposed to speak, and I spoke something. And then I went later and spoke to the priest and asked him, how can you do this? You know the difference. You're a Vaishnava. You're doing this Karmakanda Yajna. I said, well, it's a job. I have to take care of my family. But you know the difference. It's Madhvacharya, Vaishnava. And there's other things to embellish that conversation, but a Vaishnava, we're being trained to be Vaishnavas, and a Vaishnava needs to be very clear, as Bhagavad-Gita is very clear. There's an overall mission of life, and there's that overall mission of life is with part of the message of Bhagavad-Gita, and worshippers of the Devas are aviti purvakam. They're doing so without proper knowledge. Vid means to know. And because the purpose even of that is the satisfaction of Vishnu, or rendering the fruits of work unto Vishnu. So if that priest could have, at least over a period of time, made a conscientious effort to bring people to the lotus feet of Vishnu, that would be one thing. Similarly for us, those who we interact with, Krishna's advice in Bhagavad-Gita is we don't discourage people. We don't break their faith in something other. Rather, we nourish faith in the principles of bhakti, because the principles of bhakti are the mature fruit of the whole message of Bhagavad-Gita and the purpose of life. The whole of the Vedas is search for the source of everything, the search for the absolute truth, which is the source of everything. Search for the truth with a capital T. So our lives are to assist others in that search for truth with a capital T. Not chasing people with a stick and hitting with a stick, but assist in that, nourishing that search for the absolute truth. And be happy to present the absolute truth. Not boastfully, but happily. The declaration of Bhagavad Gita is very clear. Matak parataram nanyat kinchid asti dhananjaya. There is no truth superior to me. There it is. Everything is resting upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. That absolute truth is Krishna. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate. Everything comes from me. I am the source of everything. That's the absolute truth. So attention then goes to the absolute truth. That's the Vedic process. Attention goes to the absolute truth, the cause of all causes. Sarva karana karanam. Ishvara parama Krishna. So we're happy to celebrate the position of Krishna in our lives. And in a very, very simple form, the Sankirtan Yajna is very appropriate. Even people that don't know anything about anything can be engaged in chanting of Hare Krishna and be connected with the highest truth. And it's powerful. And then side by side, the study of Bhagavad Gita's message, or Nectar Devotion's message, as your two main Bhakti Vriksha groups here are doing. Side by side, you live your life and have some indication on how to live your life, and simultaneously which will cleanse the heart and allow the how to guide your life portion of the life of devotion become more and more clear, because the heart has become cleansed more and more through the chanting of the holy name. Very simple process, very powerful process. We're on the path of bhakti, and as we're on the path of bhakti, study of chapter 3 helps to understand one of the elements of bhakti, detached work. But then there are grades of detached work, and the higher form of detached work is you just do for Krishna, or cultivate coming to the stage where you just wish to do for Krishna. And there may very well be, there's practically guaranteed, there's going to be, well, I have to concern myself with the necessities of life. Well, necessities of life are supplied by the supplier of the necessities of life, the supplier of everything, the absolute truth. So connect with him. It's really simple, just like a child. The child doesn't have to ask. You know, can you serve dinner tonight? The child doesn't have to ask that. And the child may ask that. But you know, the mother's going to prepare dinner tonight, every night. Just what mothers do. They love being engaged in service that way. And Krishna is very happy to maintain all living entities. He does. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vididhati kaman. The Eka is doing that, not because these next verses are speaking of the Devas, but where do the Devas get the ability to maintain? From the Eka, from the One. So gradually one can come to the position of devotion and gradually to the position of pure devotion by proper cultivation, through good association and hearing and chanting nicely. I'll end. Let's see if there's any comments or discussion. Yes?
Maharaj, you mentioned about Nishkam Karma Yoga.
I'm listening.
How is that similar or different from Bhakti Yoga?
It's preliminary. Focus, there's a progression. I'm a beginner on the karma yoga path. This is the ladder of cultivation. So over here is the bhakti elevator, and here's the yoga ladder. So I'm interested in becoming freed from the bondage of my work. So I engage in karma yoga, but I still have desires to be fulfilled. Gradually, through that purification, then some detachment from even those desires, to the point where some interest in hearing of transcendence begins to awaken, and so a greater interest in transcendence or the well-being of the soul. And so now I've become elevated to the platform of Nishkam Karma Yoga, or as we heard the description, I just do because it's dutiful. It is to be done. We should engage in activities with sacrifice to Vishnu. Just like a child may be obedient to mommy and daddy because I don't want to be in the disfavor of mommy and daddy. It feels uncomfortable to, if they're unhappy with me. And then it may get to that I want to be, in harmony with mom and dad. If it feels right. I like that. I've learned just to do that. And then it may mature into something else, until just out of love. So over here is the bhakti elevator, and they may pass through that stage, what may externally look somewhat similar. But at the very beginning, the seed is to cultivate for the pleasure of Krishna. So that emphasis I received from the very beginning because I met devotees, and I've heard from them this principle of bhakti. So I'm engaged in bhakti because, I don't like all the ugliness and nastiness and so forth of material life. I want this other option. And so gradually the bhakti principle becomes stronger and stronger. But it's there at the beginning because of the association with a devotee who's teaching and exemplifying. So it may externally look very, very similar. But that Nishkam Karma Yogi, or Nishkam Karma Yoga, still requires the association of a bhakta to come to bhakti. Okay? Yes?
Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, why in this verse Krishna is addressing himself as a third person like Prajapati, not I?
He's humble. He's taking the position of the teacher about him. So it's third person. Yes?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Maharaj, when you explained about Karma Yoga, for me the understanding was performing one's duties requires understanding of one's own nature, and in that process I was trying to understand how do we distinguish between one's own nature and what is the characteristics of a person, if they're coming from the subtle elements like the mind, intelligence, and false ego, and what is true nature of the person?
I just got off a long flight from Calcutta. There was a little stopover in Doha, but it was a long flight. And on that long flight, one of the questions, the inquiries into the Absolute, was exactly on this question. Was it you that asked the question? And I gave, the elaborate answer. And here's a short one. There's the soul, and there's the covering of the soul. And psychophysical nature has to do with the coverings of the soul. It's material. Coverings of the soul are material. Each of us are spirit soul, but each of us have coverings. And prescribed duty for one may not be prescribed duty for another. There may be some things that both jiva souls do as prescribed duty. Rise early and take a bath and perform Mangalarti or something, prescribed, something that we share. And then there's some dissimilarities. So, yes, it has to do with mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then there's elaborate, many references. One of them is in Bhishma Dev's discussion with Maharaj Yudhishthira. There's several verses where he's describing prescribed duties for different sectors of society, Varnas in particular. But so back to the foundation of your question, yes, it has to do with mind, intelligence, and false ego, different influences of guna and karma. And it gets complex. Therefore, each of us, to understand what our prescribed duty is, we should study the scripture and we should be under guidance of a qualified teacher. Because quite likely, we're not going to get it right. We can't see ourselves so well, even you look in the mirror. Because, we're seeing what we want to see rather than what's there. So it helps to have someone who's detached that can help us see. And that person that's detached, it's good if there's a qualification of they have knowledge of scripture and some, training themselves in Krishna consciousness, and they can help guide us. In the beginning stage, there's just, it gets refined as we go along. The beginning stage is to get certain basic principles right, and then refined as we go along. So guidance is something that starts in the beginning and it continues as we go along. More and more, what is our prescribed duty? Like Arjuna. What's my duty? Maharaj Yudhishthira asking Grandfather Bhishma, okay, you convinced me I should become king. What is my duty? I have to engage all the citizens in their prescribed duties. How do I understand how to do that? It gets refined as we go along. But the principles are still there. Okay? Anything else? Oh. Thank you.
Any particular activity can fall in the realm of karma yoga or bhakti yoga. It seems like there are two elements, among many two elements. One is the pleasure of Vishnu, and the other seems is one's own sense of identity. So, for example, persons may come for Janmashtami or a particular festival, and they may offer something for pleasure of Krishna. That may be Karma Yoga, although it's on Janmashtami day, or Karma Yoga tinged with Bhakti, because the sense of identity is still not.
Yeah, the consciousness is the operative principle, and the recipient of the person on the other side. The priest, the consciousness of the priest, and because there's worship that goes on where the consciousness of the priest is not so bhakti centered, it's something else centered. So, carry on.
So I was thinking, perhaps simplistically, that any activity is karma yoga if I think of myself as a particular role that I'm playing, I'm a husband or I'm a mother or whatever.
I'm a religious man, I come to the temple because it's Janmashtami. I don't go any 364 other days of the year, but on Janmashtami I go, and I put something on the altar because that's what religious people do. They put something on the altar on Janmashtami.
And then it is Jnana Yoga, when a person does something thinking, I am not this body. This is just activities of the modes of nature. And Bhakti Yoga, if a person is I'm a servant of Krishna.
Well, it's not, the line is not so rigid. By that I mean, the person may be coming, who's really clearly on the Kanishta platform, even when they're because it's Janmashtami, I'm doing it because I'll get some punya points. And with those punya points, I'll prosper more. My real interest is not even so much, doing something for Krishna. I want to prosper. And to prosper, I do that particular piety, and I know I'll give X and I'll get back 10X. It's a good investment. So the consciousness may be like that. But if the recipient of that gesture is trained in devotional service and on the path of pure devotional service, that person's bhakti has begun, depending upon the consciousness of the recipient of that service. And so forth. The congregational chanting of the holy name that they hear and the prasadam that they take and other elements that make devotional service being more than just beginning. They just it's being moved along. So there's a relationship. And aside from analysis of which stage one is in, the function for us, which isn't in the comment or question that you're raising, but it's a comment I wish to make, which is the consciousness that we're in when people come to the temple or to a home gathering or whatever the activity is. The more that we are Krishna conscious, the more that we'll be able to transmit and benefit others in Krishna consciousness. So the responsibility is over here, not just what the consciousness is over there. Because that consciousness of a genuine devotee of Krishna can be the agent of transformation of the consciousness of others that come forward, even just by circumstance. So I don't know if I've responded properly to your question.
I was actually leading to the appreciation that because the consciousness doesn't have that discrete mindset, it is so much more important to engage in devotional activities under the guidance of a spiritual master who can fine-tune the consciousness so that it's not, once you had said many years ago that person may be doing high-grade goodness activities and may very well look like bhakti, but they may only end up with high-grade karmic reactions and not pure devotional consciousness. So I was appreciating of, as you were saying, Prabhupada's purport and you were explaining that it's important, how much more important it is to perform devotional service under such guidance.
And take it back to the family unit again. As parents or as children, as members of a family, the consciousness that we, as mother and father, start with that, in the family, or husband and wife, even if there's no children, the consciousness that we carry it has profound effect on one another and profound effect upon those with whom we associate in terms of evolving our consciousness as a family and the interaction of our family with other families on the path to Krishna. And that very much is dependent upon proper guidance. Hearing the message of Bhagavad-Gita very carefully, trying to apply that message of Bhagavad-Gita very carefully, understanding how to apply it properly through proper guidance. That becomes then the spiritual family model. That's what Krishna consciousness is. Such a spiritual family. Okay? Looks like we're done. I made it. I'm not jet-lagged out. Because I took a little nap before coming over so you could lead kirtan some more. Oh, you can lead kirtan some more. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Did your mom make this? I saw her in the kitchen, so I figured. They smell good.